Hello, everyone. Riot Kent here with Riot Blizz, and we're here with the 12.8 patch rundown. This is going to be a little bit weird because we're here without Mort, who is on vacation for this patch. So he's actually taking a backseat on this one. He's actually directing this one and not like the talent for this one. Like Mort just does everything, right? So now he's a director. So he's here in the background. But yeah, we're here to bring the patch. Riot Blizz is a designer on the Live Balance team. He's a newer designer that joined the team. He worked on some things that you've seen this set that might have excited you, such as the Edge of Night rework. How's it going, Blizz?
I'm doing great, and I'm glad to finally be on one of these things, even though it is from Mort not being here.
Great. Yeah. Blizz has been like a big contributor to a lot of our patches here. And on this one, it was just me and Blizz on this. And so we can get right into it. This is the post Worlds patch. And for those of you who have been around for a while, you know that we crank things up to a 10 when we get towards the end of a set and are heading into the next set. But it's not time for that yet. That'll happen in the next two patches. For this one, we're just going to be fine-tuning it because it's after Worlds, but we're not ready to go into all the fun, super fun, crank it up to 10 stuff yet. So with that, the goals for this patch are, one, to fine-tune the meta by making sure that a lot of strategies are viable and the stuff that's like super strong isn't drowning everybody else, Sivir. And then two, bring up the power of underperforming forecasts, 3 stars, so that when you hit them, you feel good about it and you have a viable chance of like winning the game. And the last goal that we had was to rework the attack speed slow system, just like the tiering and the numbers, to something that makes more sense long term and based on what a lot of the learnings that we've had from this set so far.
Yeah, we really didn't want to separate the live experience from the Worlds experience too much. We wanted players to be able to go and watch Worlds and see what's happening in those games, and then be able to go and play them in their own games, but have a slightly more refined experience due to the knowledge that we've gained from observing the previous patch.
So if you want to climb, this is the patch. So let's go right into it. So the first slide, large trait changes. The first change is Chemtech will be getting a health regen buff at Chemtech 5, 7, and 9, from 7% to 8%, 10 to 13%, and 18 to 20%. When we took out the damage reduction from Chemtech, it left the trait very squishy and really tough to take advantage of the full health regen. This is a way for us to give power back into the survivability of the comp, especially in the higher parts of the vertical, without giving back that damage reduction. The health regen is a much more like counterable stat and also much more visual and appreciable.
Yeah, and it definitely scales with tank and health items rather than Rage Blades and Quicksilvers. And so it does not prop the Warwick up back to the minutes that he was before.
Yep. For Enchanter, we're seeing Enchanters can be really strong when played properly, but at the higher tier of verticals, it's still really hard to be successful with it. So we're giving some more power to that heal and shield boost so that when you do hit the dream comp of 4 or 5 Enchanters with 3-star Morgana, 3-star Senna, those heals and shields will be very, very thick.
Yeah, this essentially just comes down to the Senna comp was not having a great time, but a lot of the individual units were pretty strong in other comps, and so it just made sense to buff the trait rather than individual units like Morgana.
Mm-hmm. With Hextech, you'll see later that we're taking a lot of taking some power out of the Sivir comp that's played a lot. But in general, we're kind of seeing the Hextech trait struggle without Sivir, and also when with Sivir, not that powerful. So we're giving some of the power back in the shield, which means that it'll benefit other units, not just the on attack, which is good on Sivir.
Yeah, that's the big thing there for me. Me and Ken talked about this for like 20 minutes, and it just ultimately came down to the shield is more useful for the other units in Hextech, while the on hit is basically a Sivir only part of the trait. Like Nocturne can use it to an extent, but we wanted to make sure that the trait was buffed, not Sivir was buffed with the trait.
Yeah, by giving this power into Hextech 4, which gets Hextech 4, 6, and 8, which all get a small buff. Just makes the tankiness of the comp overall stronger, which also benefits that Sivir comp. And so, like, whichever way you want to play this comp, it should be stronger, and it makes sense because the comp is not performing really well right now. For mutants, we're seeing a couple of the mutants be super strong. For those of you who have been watching a lot of TFT, you see that the Voracious Appetite version, those end game capped boards are super strong. We actually want to do something more about its specific interactions with like items like ZZ Rot and target dummies. But because that's a text change, it'll take. We're saving that for next patch. But for now, we're going to be reducing the power in the trait at all levels. So Voracious Appetite goes from 20, 30, 40 to 18, 25, 35, 80 in AP. And Cybernetics, which has also been performing really well at the higher trait tiers, especially if you can get those those mutant spats, mutant emblems on your other units, are losing health at Mutant 5 and Mutant 7 from 900 and 1350 to 800 and 1250.
Yeah, and for the people that are asking about Synaptic on here, where's Synaptic? Synaptic's still strong. It's looking a lot better in the like pure mutant without a mutant emblem situations, while it's certainly still strong with like Ari with a mutant emblem. But we still later on you'll see that we hit Kha'Zix just a little bit to try to help out with those situations.
Yep. On to the next. So next one is the big one. Scrap mid game and just kind of throughout the game, its power level has been really high. Its power curve remains high, and because the comp is relatively easy to play, has become super dominant this patch. So what we're going to do is take away a lot of shield from Scrap 4. A lot of this power from Scrap 4 should be loaded into turning the item components into big items, rather than having like raw power in that like huge health shield at the beginning of combat. So the shield per component is dropping from 40 to 30 at Scrap 4, which is a massive nerf. But because most of the power should be loaded in those components, it makes a lot more sense long term, and the comp is just way too strong. If you get to Scrap 6, it's a smaller nerf, but it's still a very big nerf. It goes from 60 shield per component to 50.
Yeah, but we left Scrap 2 in the same spot because we do think that the Scrap Splash is in a pretty healthy spot. We just wanted to hit a little bit more chase of with like the 4, specifically like Sivir comps or Jinx twin shot comps.
Yeah, we think that by doing this type of nerf for the 4 Scrap, it should really hit the mid game and some late game boards with Sivir and for Jinx. So players will go into the late game with less health. The last change for traits, Brad or Blizz, you want to go over this one?
Syndicate, it's super similar to the Enchanter one. A lot of the individual units in the trait are pretty strong, but the trait itself, just as a vertical, is very weak, and so we just took the approach of buffing the vertical. Hopefully this opens up Ash reroll to an extent again with Jhin, maybe Jhin Syndicate emblems. Those are fun. Open up Ari as a carry again rather than without mutant, and then up the bonus just a little bit, so the chasing for that Syndicate 7 is really valuable.
Yeah, we're not really seeing the vertical syndicates perform really well, and even when we see Ari as a carry, it's always in Arcanists or mutants, and so this hopefully will make her viable again while being played vertically, and make you more excited to hit those syndicate emblems.
Yeah, Syndicate's been in a weird spot. You've seen us over set 6 and 6.5 now of like buffing it and nerfing it, and I think it's the sweet spot is somewhere in between 55 and 50, but we can't really do that because it's such a ugly number. And so I think putting it to 55 and seeing where it goes from there, and then we can adjust the individual champions will be the thing that we have to do.
All right, on to items. Only one large item change. This is Quickest Silver, Radiant Quicksilver, is getting a pretty large attack speed buff from 45% to 55%. This is one of the worst performing Radiant items, and we want you to be excited about all the Radiant options that you get when you pick Radiant Relics, the Prismatic Augment. So this just brings us up to the power of the rest of them.
Yep, it turns out the CC immunity for longer is not as valuable in the current meta due to how fast-paced fights are. So it just makes sense to give a little bit more combat power to this.
Cool. Moving on to the small changes for units for champs.
Yep.
So
There
this
are
one,
no large champs, by the way. Large champ changes, only small. And
Yep.
that's due to the wanting to keep the patch a little bit smaller.
Yep. And there might be some questions about why not Ari? I mean, not Ari. Why not Sivir?
Sure.
And a lot of Sivir's power, we think, is loaded into the mid game of Scrap, or even the late game of Scrap. Just you scale so well throughout the entire game, and that's the way she's been played. So by nerfing Scrap, especially that large of a nerf, we think we'll bring Sivir into line with the rest of the forecasts. Moving on to champs. So the first thing you'll see on the slide is a bunch of attack speed slow changes. This kind of shows the tiering that we now have for attack speed slows. And the way it works is when a unit is attack speed slow, it'll take the highest tier amount. So basically, if someone gets hit by Echo and Zillion, it'll take Zillion 3's 50% first and override the rest of them. We kind of want like the tiering to be, we've learned a lot about attack speed slows, and we want the tierings to make a lot of sense at the different areas where we put them into the game. So for example, 20% with Echo, and later you'll see Renata as well. It's kind of like a mild, it's an annoyance, but it's also like mildly powerful, and you should not want to get hit by that. You should care about it. At 15% with Renata, we felt that it was not enough to make that feel that way. 30% will be our standard. A lot of units will have this, units and items, and 40% is like something that's stronger, harder to hit, more localized, and the 50% is reserved for like the super sharp moments because it's really, really powerful. So the first thing you'll see here is Zillion is shifted from 20, 35, 50% to the new tiers of 30, 40, and 50%. So his attack speed slow gets to hit that super sharp 50% at 3-star. Kids to keep that at 3-star.
Yep. This is an amazing buff to time flies as it makes your transition into Zillion 3 just a little bit better.
Yeah. Time flies is going to be an S tier comp. Just watch.
I'll be able to get 5th with it now instead of 7th.
Yeah. Next we have Echo, who's getting a nerf across the board from 25, 25, 35% to 20, 20, 30%. Echo's attack speed slow is very easy to hit large clumps. It's a very smart slow. And so at 3 costs, we think this should be more of a mild annoyance at most levels. But if you 3-star him, it'll be more impactful.
Yep, and especially with him being such a good carrier of Frozen Heart, it just makes sense to make it so his slow is not a similar power level of the Frozen Hearts until 3-star, so that you're losing some value of the unit's ability there.
Yeah, somewhere Iniko is like cheering for like this nerf right now, and it's like Frozen Heart Echo cringe, and now it's a little bit weaker, but he'll still complain. I promise. Next change is specifically targeted at Gangplank in stage 2. We've seen a lot of Gangplanks in stage 2. When you put items on him, he just deals so much damage, farms so much gold, and lets players, fast 9 way more than we want him to be able to. With this nerf, it's actually still really, really small of a nerf, and so achieving that like stage 2 Gangplank dream should still be possible. It will just take a little bit more effort. You need to care a little bit more about your positioning. You don't want to run into bodyguards or like get stuck on some chunky unit in the front and not get the farm off. So it'll matter just a little bit, but still, like Gangplank will still be really good.
Yeah, on paper this seems like a non-factor, but it really is a factor when you're playing Mercs and trying to open fort. The Gangplank's ability to still farm gold despite losing is very strong, and so this will hit that just a little bit. It'll force you to slam a couple more items to be able to get that, which in turn nerf the comp. Yeah.
And also when you get those Yordle openers, just you have Gangplank there, you're just farming gold through Yordles and Gangplanks. It's a little too easy to get that much gold, so we're nerfing that a little bit. With 4 and 5 cost, small champ changes. A lot of this, you'll see that most of this is targeted at 4 cost 3-stars that are underperforming, which is one of our goals. We want to make sure that all of them, that when you hit them, they're good enough for you to feel like you can win the game. They feel like the 4 cost 3-stars that are already really good right now that just feel like really rare and like fun experiences. So the first one, Braum gets a pretty large damage buff at Braum 3. It's not going to matter that much. But you know, if you for some reason have IE Jeweled Gauntlet Death Cap on Braum for Braum 3, he's going to chunk.
Yeah, and we specifically did damage here instead of CC duration because that could create some very degenerate situations where he's just permanently CCing people. So this damage should be able to help you achieve your Braum 3 fantasies without making the opponent feel like they have no ability to beat you.
Yep. For Kha'Zix, you want to go over this one?
Yeah, I mentioned it a lot before of the Synaptic thing. It also nerfs just mutants in general, but it's specifically Synaptic. Kha'Zix doesn't always require a blue buff, but in Synaptic he definitely doesn't, so he can slot in more damage items, specifically IEs or BTs, which he isn't always able to afford. And so this is just hitting some of that damage that scales with AD rather than his base damage. It looks a little larger than it is, I think. AD percents are really hard to just like understand without doing the math. But either way, we compensated him with Kha'Zix 3. We found that Kha'Zix 3 was not performing up to the other 3-star 4-cost standards because typically he ended up just dying when he was midair and jumping. And so this will hopefully allow him to kill his targets more consistently.
Yeah, Kha'Zix was actually performing super, super well in data as well. And so like when you see this nerf, a large part of his damage is actually loaded into the base spell damage. So when you put them together and you do the math, this 15% down at 2-star isn't actually as large as 15%. It's actually considered what we would consider a small nerf. And so it's more like we're nudging him down a little bit at 1 and 2-star, mainly to hit the Synaptic and also, you know, his ceiling when you get everything going.
Yep.
So for Renata, she is one of the units that was touched with the attack speed changes. She's going from 15% to 20% now. As mentioned earlier, 15% didn't really feel like you cared about getting hit by it, but we want you to care. It shouldn't like cripple all of your units, but it should be something that feels like, I want to avoid getting hit by this attack speed slow. And so at 20%, it should feel that way. And then the other thing is at 3-star, Renata Glass was just a little bit too slow at killing enemies. So we're giving her a 10% buff to her 3-star damage.
Yep, I don't have anything to add to that. You
Okay.
nailed it on the head.
Cool. Last one is Vi. So Vi is a great tank and damage dealer, but at 3-star, she just wasn't really doing both of those very well. She kind of does a little bit of both, but now with a buff both to her spell damage and her spell shield, she should be able to be the super crank that you have when you hit Vi 3. And with how popular the unit is in a lot of different comps, it should be pretty hard to hit her. And so when you hit her, it should really pay off. So her spell damage at 3-star goes from 450 to 500, and her shield goes from 750 to 850.
Yeah, Vi was just running into a similar issue as Kha'Zix, and I guess Renata as well, where as a 3-star, they just can't kill units fast enough still. And so while we buff the damage, I think the bigger thing here is the spell shield, because it allows her to survive to be able to get that damage out more.
The last change on this slide is Jinx. Jinx is also hit by the scrap nerf from before, but also Jinx is just in the late game is just really, really strong. So she's getting a small nudge on her 1 and 2-star rocket damage.
Yeah, it's crazy how this unit went from like one of the worst five costs in like set 6 to now the best 5 cost.
Yeah, she's real good.
She's crazy.
All right, next slide. Small item changes. These are both just related to our attack speed slow changes.
Yeah.
Blizz, you want to go over them?
Yeah, we found that Eternal Winter in the Portable Forge augment was not performing quite up to the standards of the rest of the ornaments. Pretty similar to like the pass that we did with the Radiant items with Quickest Silver. And so this is one of the things that sparked the attack speed slow changes, because we're like, it makes the most sense to just kind of buff it in this way rather than any of the other ways. And then similar with Frozen Heart, it's been very powerful on assassins for a while. Jump to the backline, slow the units. But we didn't want to like nerf the tankiness or anything because we do want it to be a frontline unit, hopefully. And so just nerfing the attack speed, the really strong sharp part of that, that feels really bad when it's put on a Sin.
Yep. So Frozen Heart, it should still really matter. You don't want a Frozen Heart Echo jumping into your backline. You don't want your melee frontliner to walk into a Frozen Heart. But it will hurt a little bit less now. And we think that this 30% for Frozen Heart at like the standard rate makes a lot of sense for something that's like a 2 hex radius.
Yeah, and I really like seeing that these two attack speed slow items are now the same number. I think it makes it was in hindsight it's a little confusing why the standard item was stronger than the not standard item.
We also have a system change. So in double up, player will now take a minimum of 1 damage upon losing a round in double up. So previously when players took damage in double up, incoming damage cut in half, rounded down, save the remainder. And this resulted in some times when like when you reinforce an ally, your ally's units die and you still win, and your opponent takes 1 point of damage cut in half, which means they take 0, and then it gets really weird. And then it gets saved for later. So it's like wasn't very clear, and so this change makes it so that when there's none of that like hidden half damage. Players will always take 1 damage if they lose. So it should be a good change, good quality of life change. When in double up, there should be far fewer like weird scenarios where things just don't add up the way you think it should. So
yeah, this is definitely a pretty big nerf to like the one teammate win streak, one teammate lose streak strategy, where you end up not taking any damage but getting essentially double the gold generation. It will give you a little bit more item or like a carousel priority though, but it was just very confusing before for a lot of players of just why didn't I take damage even though I lost that fight.
Yep. And the last slide, we have bug fixes. Bug fixes are always good. Fix an issue causing Sunlight Cape to only affect enemies within 1 hex range. There was, I saw this on Reddit as well, but there was basically reports of Sunfire Cape only hitting things really close by, not going all the way to 4 hex radius, which made the item a lot weaker than it was supposed to be. We also fixed an issue preventing Senna from getting mana from blue buff and blue battery after casting. Super weird issue. If you've had this on live, it's fixed now. And the last one, fix an issue with Orianna not getting mana after going stealth with Edge of Night while casting. Yep. So that's all we have for this patch. And after this one, we're going to have 12.9 and 12.10, which we will have the fun patches where we will add something fun to the game and you can experience it. But it's going to be 2 patches instead of 1 this time, which when it's like usually 1, but we want, the dedicated players to be able to both experience this fun stuff and be able to play on set 7 PBE when that comes out in 12.10. And then in 12.11, 3 patches from now, that's when set 7 comes out. All the exciting stuff that we've been working.
Ooh, no spoilers yet.
No spoilers. Yeah. And that's it for the patch. Relatively small patch. A lot of these were just fine-tuning goals before we go into all the fun stuff in 12.9. Blizz, anything else you want to add?
No, I think you covered it pretty well, Kent. But thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks Mort, who's in the background, probably laughing at us right now.
He's behind the camera.
Hope you have fun with this patch. Look forward to what we have and then in not too long you'll start seeing our really fun spoilers for set 7. Yeah. With that, that's it for us. Was that what Mort says? That's it from us?
Something like that. I think he said see ya. I think he goes see ya and then clicks off.
All right. See ya.